So, back with another excerpt from Atlas Shrugged. These are going to come frequently now, and they are going to be, again, without much commentary from me. I'm going to build into this a little bit. I'm going to explain, again, these two protagonist / antagonist characters as they're interacting. The reason why I picked this passage is because of the exegetical monologue, or a dialogue, excuse me, that's actually taking place between them. This is also an expository conversation that it really sees the author using these two people to work at this societal understanding of what's taking place in this work of fiction. And the two characters are Hank, or Henry Rearden, who owns Rearden Steel, who's invented a formula for the best steel that anybody's ever, or the best metal that anybody's ever dealt with. It's called Rearden metal. It's super inexpensive, very easy to produce, but a very, very powerful formula that has made this metal, this Rearden metal, incredibly valuable in the sense of what it can be used for and what it does. There have been build-ups to this particular interaction where the state has stepped in, and this, remember, this is taking place in a fictionalized future of the United States, where the state has stepped in and has begun to put in place like the Fair Play Act and whatnot. And now it's illegal for people to sell particular amounts over a certain amount to any purchaser, and everything that's going on. And Rearden has agreed to deal with a man named Denniger, who owns a coal mine, who needs this metal to be able to produce the coal that's needed to run the smelting furnaces at Rearden's smelteries, refineries, not refineries, that's a different thing. And then there's Dr. Ferris, who is a biologist who works at a national institute, and they really want Rearden metal. And they found out about this behind-the-scenes deal between Denniger and Rearden, and Dr. Ferris approaches Rearden and basically tells him that they found out about the deal and is kind of making some offers to him. And this is where we, shall we say, see Rearden call their bluff. All right. So it starts. Rearden said calmly, "In my youth," remember this is this proposal, "this was called blackmail." And Dr. Ferris grinned. "That's what it is, Mr. Rearden. We've entered a much more realistic age." But there was a peculiar difference, thought Rearden, between the manner of a plain blackmailer and that of Dr. Ferris. A blackmailer would show signs of gloating over his victim's sin and of acknowledging its evil. He would suggest a threat to the victim and a sense of danger to them both. Dr. Ferris conveyed none of it. His manner was that of dealing with the normal and the natural. It suggested a sense of safety. It held no tone of condemnation, but a hint of comradeship, and comradeship based for both of them on self-contempt. The sudden feeling that made Rearden lean forward in a posture of eager attentiveness was a feeling that he was about to discover another step along his half-glimpsed trail. Seeing Rearden's look of interest, Dr. Ferris smiled and congratulated himself on having caught the right key. The game was clear to him now. The markings of the pattern were falling in the right order. Some men, thought Dr. Ferris, would do anything so long as it was left unnamed. But this man wanted frankness. This was the tough realist he had expected to find. "You're a practical man, Dr. Rearden," said Dr. Ferris amiably. "I can't understand why you would want to stay behind the times. why you should want to stay behind the times. Why don't you adjust yourself, play it right? You're smarter than most of them. You're a valuable person. We've wanted you for a long time. And when I heard that you were trying to string along with Jim Taggart, did I say Taggart? It's Jim Taggart. Anyway, Jim Taggart from the wedding that I shared the other day is here. Not here, but in this part of the story. When I heard that you were trying to string along with Jim Taggart, I knew you could be had. Don't bother with Jim Taggart. He's nothing. He's just flea bait. Get into the big game. We can use you and you can use us. Want us to step on Orrin Boyle? One of Rearden's competitors. Sort of. Want us to step on Orrin Boyle for you? He's given you an awful beating. Want us to trim him down a little? It can be done. Or want us to keep Ken Daniger in line? That's the guy that Rearden struck the illegal deal with. How impractical you've been about that. I know why you sold him the metal. It's because you need him to get coal from. So you take a chance on going to jail and paying huge fines just to keep on the good side of Ken Daniger? Do you call that good business? Now make a deal with us and just let Mr. Daniger understand that if he doesn't toe the line, he'll go to jail. But you won't. Because you've got friends. He hasn't got. And you'll never have to worry about your coal supply from then on. Now that's the modern way of doing business. Ask yourself, which way is more practical? And whatever anyone said about you, nobody's ever denied that you're a great businessman and a hard-headed realist. That's what I am, said Rearden. That's what I thought, said Dr. Ferris. You rose to riches in an age when most men were going bankrupt. You've always managed to blast obstacles, to keep your mills going and to make the money. That's your reputation, so you wouldn't want to be impractical now, would you? What for? What do you care as long as you make money? Leave the theories to people like Bertram Scudder and the ideals to people like Balf Eubank. And be yourself. Come down to earth. You're not the man who lets sentiment interfere with business. No, said Rearden slowly, I wouldn't. Not any kind of sentiment. Dr. Ferris smiled. Don't you suppose we knew that? He said, his tone suggesting that he was letting his patent leather hair down to impress a fellow criminal by a display of superior cunning. We've waited a long time to get something on you. You honest men are such a problem and such a headache, but we knew you'd slip sooner or later, and this is just what we wanted. You seem to be pleased about it. Don't I have a good reason to be? Said Ferris. But after all, I did break one of your laws. Well, what do you think they're for? Dr. Ferris did not notice that sudden look on Rearden's face, the look of a man hit by the final vision of that which he had sought to see. Dr. Ferris was past the stage of seeing. He was intent on delivering the last blows to an animal caught in a trap. Did you really think that we want those laws to be observed? Said Dr. Ferris. We want them broken. You'd better get it straight that it's not a bunch of Boy Scouts you're up against. Then you'll know that this is not the age for beautiful gestures. We're after power, and we mean it. You fellows were pikers, but we know the real trick, and you'd better get wise to it. There's no way to rule innocent men. The only power any government has is the power to crack down on criminals. Well, when there aren't enough criminals, boy, I'm having issues today. Well, when there aren't enough criminals, one makes them. One declares so many things to be a crime that it becomes impossible for men to live without breaking laws. Who wants a nation of law-abiding citizens? What's there in that for anyone? But just pass the kind of laws that can neither be observed, nor enforced, nor objectively interpreted, and you create a nation of lawbreakers, and then you cash in on guilt. Now that's the system, Mr. Rearden. That's the game. And once you understand it, you'll be much easier to deal with. Watching Dr. Ferris watch him, Rearden saw the sudden twitch of anxiety, the look that precedes panic, as if a clean card had fallen on the table from a deck Dr. Ferris had never seen before. What Dr. Ferris was seeing in Rearden's face was a look of luminous serenity that comes from the sudden answer to an old, dark problem, a look of relaxation and eagerness together. There was a youthful youthful clarity in Rearden's eyes, and the faintest touch of contempt in the line of his mouth. Whatever this meant, and Dr. Ferris could not decipher it, he was certain of one thing: that face held no sign of guilt. "There's a flaw in your system, Dr. Ferris," Rearden said quietly, almost lightly. "A practical flaw, which you will discover when you put me on trial for selling 4,000 tons of Rearden metal to Ken Danaher." It took 20 seconds. Rearden could feel them moving past slowly, at the end of which Dr. Ferris became convinced that he had heard Rearden's final decision. "Do you think we're bluffing?" snapped Dr. Ferris. His voice suddenly had a quality of the animals he had spent so much time studying. It sounded as if he were baring his teeth. Baring his teeth. "I don't know," said Rearden. "I don't care, one way or the other. Are you going to be as impractical as that?" "The evaluation of an action as practical, Dr. Ferris, depends on what it is that one wishes to practice. Haven't you always placed your self-interest above all else? That is what I'm doing right now. If you think we'll let you get away with you will now please get out of here." I know this part is hard to read because it's not broke down. I'm going to start over from this part. "The evaluation of an action as practical, Dr. Ferris, depends on what it is that one wishes to practice. Haven't you always placed your self-interest above all else?" Ferris asked Rearden. "That is what I'm doing right now," replied Rearden. "If you think we'll let you get away with Ferris was cut off. "You will now please get out of here." "Whom do you think you're fooling, Dr. Ferris?" His voice had risen close to the edge of the screen. "The day of the barons of industry is done. You've got the goods, but we've got the goods on you, and you're going to play it our way, or you'll—" Rearden had pressed a button. Miss Ives entered as the office. "Dr. Ferris has become confused and has lost his way, Miss Ives," said Rearden. Will you escort him out, please?" He turned to Ferris. "Miss Ives is a woman. She weighs about 100 pounds, and she has no practical qualifications at all, only a superlative intellectual efficiency. She would never do for a bouncer in a saloon, only in an impractical place, such as a factory." What Rearden and Ferris have discussed here is exactly what's happening in our society in the United States today. Moral people cannot be held accountable to a law that they're not breaking. The government has no power over you if you aren't breaking the law. And we see that in Scripture. You want to have no fear of the law. In this case, we see this played out in do what's right. And that's what the Scriptures say. If you want to have no fear of the ruling authorities, then do what is right. So, immoral people, Christians in particular, have no fear of the law as long as they're doing what is morally acceptable, what is morally right. So to have control over people, the government, elected servants, and the unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats, government officials, have to find ways to make what you're doing a crime. Gathering for worship, when we've told you that it's not safe, that's a crime. Going someplace in public without covering your face, that's a crime. There's nothing immoral about either of those, and in fact, in the case of worship, it's immoral to not gather to worship just because the government tells you not. But they've now made it a crime, and they can now wield that power against you. For what reason? And why? Because they want to, and they want the power over you. You need to think about that. Are you afraid of your government, even though you're not breaking any laws? Are you afraid of what's going to happen to you if you go out in public in a group? Are you afraid that they're going to come for you if you gather for worship? Are you afraid that they're going to turn off the water and the power to your church's physical location because you dared to violate some edict from on high? They made you criminals over something that is not immoral. In fact, they've criminalized the very moral and right thing to do. That is the direction we're heading, and that is what Rearden and Ferris were discussing, and that's what Rearden called him out for. The next time that I do one of these, you're going to see how Rearden defends himself in court. Because he doesn't let fear drive him to do what they tell him to do just because they say it's the right thing. If you're a Christian, you must read this book. It's long. Listen to it on Audible. Find a way to read it. It's a necessity. Have your eyes open. As always, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for being open-minded. Thanks for listening. I would ask that over here in the corner, somewhere on your screen, you hit the subscribe button. It's important, not for me, but because mainstream media, legacy media, isn't going to get the word out. They're not going to let people who don't toe the established line speak. So for the sake of liberty and for the sake of the defense of this nation, small little independent voices like mine need to be heard, especially the interviews. It's got very little to do with my commentary and a lot more to do with the interviews and the people who are affected when liberties are tread on. So once again, hit the subscribe button, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much.